Start. Let it gitu na, gitu na. Paling dari. वैष्णव ठाकुर दयार सागर ए दासे करुणा करी 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 दिया पद छाया सदा हे आमार তোমার চরণ ধরি দিয়া পদ ছায়া সদায়ে আমার তোমার চরণ ধরি ওহে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ার সাগর এ দাসে করুণা করি ওহে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ার সাগর এ দাসে করুণা করি ছায়া বেগধমি ছায়া দোষ সধি ছায়া গুণ দেহ দাসে ছায়া বেগধমি ছায়া দোষ সধি ছায়া গুণ দেহ দাসে ও ছায়া বেগধমি ছায়া দোষ সধি ছায়া গুণ দেহ দাসে ছায়া বেগধমি ছায়া দোষ সধি ছায়া গুণ দেহ দাসে ছায়া সত সঙ্গ দেহ হে আমার বসিছি সঙ্গর আছে ছায়া সত সঙ্গ দেহ হে আমার বসিছি সঙ্গের ওহে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ার সাগর এ দাসে করুণা করি ওহে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ার সাগর এ দাসে করুণা করি একাকী আমার নাহি পাইব হরি নাম সংকীর্তনে একাকী আমার নাহি পাইব হরি নাম সংকীর্তনে হয় একাকী আমার নাহি পাইব হরি নাম সংকীর্তনে একাকী আমার নাহি পাইব হরি নাম সংকীর্তনে তুমি কৃপা করি শ্রদ্ধা বিন্দু দিয়া দেহ কৃষ্ণ নাম ধানে তুমি কৃপা করি শ্রদ্ধা বিন্দু দিয়া দেহ কৃষ্ণ নাম ধানে ওহে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ার সাগর তোমারি চরণ তলে ওহে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ার সাগর এ দাসে করুণা করি কৃষ্ণা সে তোমার কৃষ্ণা দিতে পারো তোমারও শক্তি আছে
কৃষ্ণা সে তোমার কৃষ্ণা দিতে পারো তোমারও
हो कृष्णा से তোমার কৃষ্ণা দিতে পারো তোমারও শক্তি আছে
কৃষ্ণা সে তোমার কৃষ্ণা দিতে পারো তোমারও শক্তি আছে
আমি তো কাঙ্গাল কৃষ্ণা কৃষ্ণা বলি ওহে তব পথে পথে
আমি তো কৃষ্ণা কৃষ্ণা বলি
ও আমি তো কাঙ্গাল কৃষ্ণা কৃষ্ণা বলি ধই তব পথে পথে
আমি তো কৃষ্ণা কৃষ্ণা বলি
ও হে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ার সাগর এ দাসে করুণা করি ও হে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ার সাগর এ দাসে করুণা করি ও হে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ার সাগর এ দাসে করুণা করি ও হে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ার সাগর এ দাসে করুণা করি বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ার সাগর এ দাসে করুণা করি Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hari Bol, 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 Bol, Bol. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Glory to Srila Prabhupada. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Please accept my humble obeisances, Prabhu. So nice to see you, Hari Sari, Prabhu.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to connect with you all.
Hey, look, Premananda Prabhu's here also. Premananda Prabhu is our temple president in Bhubaneswar. One of the co-presidents, I
Hare
think.
Krishna.
So it's really...
Can you see me enough, or should I put on another light?
You're a little kind of dark.
Okay, just 1 second.
Hare Krishna, Premananda Prabhu. Good to see you, Prabhuji. Let's see.
That's better, I think.
That's much better. Your health looks good, Prabhuji. I'm happy to see.
All that glitters is not gold.
Okay, I won't ask any further. Okay. So I just want to address all the devotees here tonight something. And it's just with so much great pleasure, I get a chance to introduce you to one of my favorite devotees, Hari Sari Prabhu, who I don't know a whole lot about your previous history and things, but I think you joined in London or England anywhere. From England.
No. I can give a quick overview if you like. But,
okay, just give me a minute to say something about you anyway. But Hari Sari Prabhu is so famous, he's written a series of books about Srila Prabhupada and his experiences as being Prabhupada's servant. And he traveled extensively with Prabhupada. And I just get so much happiness with Hari Sai Prabhu because he really remembers and wants to serve Srila Prabhupada in a very deep way. And there's so many stories people have, there's so many services people have. But what inspires me about devotees when I see they have devotion to Srila Prabhupada, and I really feel that with you, Prabhuji. I'm so happy to have you here tonight. And by the way, one of the experiences that Hari Sai Prabhu had was being with Srila Prabhupada when Prabhupada came to Orissa in Bhubaneswar. And he was Prabhupada's servant at that time. So I spoke with Hari Sai Prabhu before when we asked him if he would speak, and he asked me what he should talk about. And I said, well, they really like to hear from Prabhupada disciples and just pretty much anything you'd like. And I suggested to him that maybe he might want to speak something about how he joined. I think a lot of devotees like to hear that. And Hari Sai Prabhu suggested also maybe you devotees might want to ask questions. So I'd like to hear some comments from you, Hari Sai Prabhu, but if you don't mind, let me just introduce real quick a couple of other devotees. This is Premananda Prabhu, who you see on the screen here. He's an old friend. He's been around Bhubaneswar for a long time. And I don't know the management system in Bhubaneswar now, but Premananda Prabhu is one of the main authorities there. And then we also have with us, I'm going to pin these guys up here also. Let's see. Does this work? Add spotlight? Yeah. This is Tukaram Prabhu and Amritesh Gaur Prabhu. Let me add them. They're in charge of the Bhubaneswar IYF. And I think Premananda Prabhu will agree, or he can disagree if you want, that they've really changed the whole atmosphere of the temple so much. There's like, I don't know, maybe 300 men, 200 ladies or something that they've gotten to join the ISKCON IYF, and they're all chanting, and they're very, very humble and very, very sweet. They're wonderful preachers, and I'm so happy. And they've been asking me to do a little humble service for them. I'm trying to organize this program once a week, which is my great opportunity to get association with Hari Sai Prabhu and Radha Maharaj and other devotees. So I just wanted to introduce them, and maybe they have a word or two they want to say to greet you before you go ahead and start. Anybody? I'm finished with my talk. Premananda Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. So I would like to welcome Hari Sauri Prabhu, and we're just waiting to hear from his lotus mouth, like about Srila Prabhupada and about maybe a little bit about ISKCON Bhubaneswar when he came here, and whatever, because we are just waiting to hear from him. So this is my request that please tell us about Srila Prabhupada and anything like your experience with Srila Prabhupada and ISKCON Bhubaneswar. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. So we've got what, until 7 o'clock?
Yeah, you can go later too if you like. I think Tukaram Prabhu can say Ramritesh Gaur. And do either one of you want to say anything before Prabhu starts?
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji, that you have agreed to give us time. Prabhupada's, like when we associate with Prabhupada's disciples, so naturally we want to hear about Srila Prabhupada because that's adventurous. So we also want to hear, like when you were a young person like us, at that time you joined Srila Prabhupada. So we want to know more about Srila Prabhupada. We want to see Prabhupada through your window. And we also want to know that because you were with Srila Prabhupada, and it means you're the oldest devotee in ISKCON. So how ISKCON is moving ahead? Is it what Srila Prabhupada is expecting, or it's Srila Prabhupada wants something more? So we want to listen from you so that we can develop, we can try to imbibe those qualities and those characteristics that Srila Prabhupada actually wanted in ISKCON. So.
Okay. Well, I don't think we're going to get all of that in 1 hour, but I'll do my best.
Okay. Let me just add one small thing to it. Our connection has been off for the last couple of days and just on and off for a minute or two. It'll be a miracle, which I'll be very happy if it lasts the whole time. But if I disappear, it's not because
we have the same problem here in Mayapur. it's constantly been going on and off for the last couple of days. And it takes 2 or 3 minutes to reconnect once the power comes back on. So if we
Yeah, well,
get cut off, don't abandon me. We'll
okay.
try and
Here we
reconnect
were
again.
off for about 6 hours at a time or something. It's been really, really bad. So
Well, here it's fortunately it's been minutes, but let's see how we go.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for being with us tonight. We'll go ahead and let you talk, and you can introduce us something about yourself in a better way than I did. I'm sorry.
Okay. I was born in England in 1950, so I'm 70 years old now. And when I was 20, I emigrated to Australia. When we got off the boat in Sydney, this was April of 1971, we went to have a look at our new home, our new place for living, Sydney City. And we walked right into the devotees. Somehow or another, I, at that time, was going through some existential changes, looking at my life, what I was doing, what was going to happen in the future, what happens when you die, why do you have to die? And so Krishna arranged for me to meet the devotees. They were out chanting in Sydney on the streets there. So that was the first day off the boat, emigrating to Australia. I bought a Back to Godhead magazine, and the following year in February of 1972, I joined the temple in Sydney, and Prabhupada came 6 weeks later, and I got initiated, first initiation. So that was in April of 1972. After that, I served for a couple of years doing Sankirtan in Sydney and Melbourne and other places. We introduced the Jagannath Rath Yatra in 1972. It's been going pretty well since then. So I had the opportunity to serve Lord Jagannath by building his first Rath cart there in Australia. In 1975, that was a stellar year for me, as they say, because it was the first year that I got to visit India. So we all came, about 30 Australians came in March of 1975. And we got a chance to have an extended association with Srila Prabhupada. Outside of India in those days, if Prabhupada came once a year through the temple where you were staying, that was, as much association as we would get. So we were lucky in Australia that Prabhupada came at least for 1 week of every year from 1971 until 1976. Even temples there were many temples in Europe and America that never got to see Srila Prabhupada, but we were lucky, although Australia's kind of a fair distance away. But Prabhupada liked to go there. So we went there in 1975. We observed Gaur Festival for about 8 or 10 days. We went down to Hyderabad, had another 1 week pandal there, and then Prabhupada came with the devotees up to Mathura. We went by train. Prabhupada, of course, flew. And we were lucky enough to participate in the opening of the Krishna Balaram Mandir on Ram Navami. So that was an extended festival from before Gaur Purnima all the way through till Ram Navami. From there, we went back to our respective temples. I somehow or another couldn't settle in once we got back. And by the end of, by the end of July, early August of 75, I moved back to India to stay and serve in the Krishna Balaram Mandir. The first day that I actually arrived there, I happened to bump into another Australian Bhubaneswar Prabhu. As soon as he saw me, I hadn't even got my suitcase off of the Tunga that I took from Mathura railway station to the temple. He grabbed me, took me in to see the temple president, the Koyananda Swami. He said, I found our new temple commander. So that was it. I moved in, I was made instantly the temple commander of ISKCON's biggest and newest temple. So I did serve there for a few months as the temple commander. And whilst I was there, Prabhupada came for 3 weeks during Janmashtami through Radhastami on his first visit to this new temple. And of course, he had invested so much time and energy and money in building it, and he was very keen to see that it was managed properly. So he thoroughly went over every aspect of running the temple. Then he went off to Bombay, I think it was. He went down to South Africa. He went to Mauritius, and he came back up to Delhi on November the 25th. So I just happened to be in Delhi for 1 day, actually, on some personal business when Prabhupada came through. And Gopal Krishna Maharaj, he asked me, can you stay for a few days here in Delhi as Prabhupada's door guard? So I was thinking, why does Prabhupada need a door guard? This is Delhi, not, America or something. But I thought, this is great. I'll get a chance to see Srila Prabhupada coming and going every day on his morning walk and later on for his darshans, etc. So I stayed for a couple of days. And I think the second morning I was there, maybe the 26th or 27th of November, I was chanting my rounds in the temple. And Hari Kesh came in. He was Prabhupada's cook. He was transcribing Prabhupada's tapes. And he was also doing some of the personal servant's duties as well. Because when Prabhupada came back to India from South Africa, he had seen some discrepancies in the management in South Africa, Nairobi also. And so he sent his secretary and personal servants, 2 of them, back to Africa to take care of the situation there. So when he arrived in Delhi, late November, he had only 1 assistant, and that was Hari Kesh. So basically they needed somebody to give Prabhupada his massage. So I was sitting in the temple room. Hari Kesh peered in through the door and he said, do you know how to massage? So I said, no, I've never done it before. So he said, well, Upendra, who was another Prabhupada's personal servants, he said he's only here for tomorrow and then he has to go to Fiji for preaching. So Prabhupada needs somebody to give him his massage for the next few days until the end of the month. So he said, you're it. So that was it. No discussion. I ran out the door. Prabhupada was staying a few doors down. We at that time had a very small temple on Toddamal Lane in Bengali markets. And I ran out the door, went up the road, up the stairs, 3 flights, came out onto the roof, and sure enough, there was Srila Prabhupada. I actually was in a kind of a state of suspended disbelief. I'd just been asked to give Prabhupada his massage. If you could get near enough to Prabhupada just to touch his lotus feet, that would be enough for a lifetime. But so anyway, I went on the roof. Prabhupada was sitting, Upendra was massaging him. After a minute or 2, Prabhupada opened his eyes. He looked at me and said, yes. The way that he did it made me doubt whether I'd actually heard correctly or not. So I repeated what Hari Kesh had told me. And Prabhupada just, all right, and closed his eyes and didn't say another word. Upendra did the massage, it took about an hour. Then when Prabhupada went downstairs to take his bath, Upendra took 2 minutes to explain to me how to massage Srila Prabhupada. And then that was it. And then he said, come back in the evening because Prabhupada has another massage when he takes rest. And I actually wasn't even aware of that. We all knew that he had a midday massage with oil, but in the privacy of his quarters, very few of us knew what would go on there. So it seemed that every night Prabhupada would take rest about 9:30 or 10 o'clock after he'd had a glass of hot milk. And then the servant would go in and massage just his hips, thighs, and calves and feet. And it was a dry massage. And then after anywhere between 10 minutes and 2 hours, you'd be there massaging Prabhupada whilst he rested a little. And then when he gave the signal, you could go out and retire for the night. And he would get up and spend the rest of the night from maybe 11 or 12 o'clock until 4, doing his translation work and commentaries on the Srimad Bhagavatam. So that was it. By some miracle, I happened to be there. Later on, I found out actually Prabhupada had seen me sitting at the door as his door guard. He recognized me from his trips to Australia, which was another remarkable feature. Prabhupada had thousands of disciples. And when he came back to Vrindavan for Janmashtami in 75, I'd gone in for a first darshan. And as soon as I sat down, Prabhupada asked, so how is everything in Australia? So I'd practically never even spoken to him in my life, except 1 or 2 exchanges on morning walks, maybe in 1974. But Prabhupada remembered that I was from Australia. Anyway, so that first night then, I came out after watching Upendra do the evening massage. And then I thought, well, this is only for 3 or 4 days. I better write this down, what happens. And 10, 20 years from now, I'll be able to read those diary notes and refresh my memory of, this amazing opportunity. So I ran down the road, there was a little bookstore there, New Janitor Book Depot. And I bought a blank notebook and I started keeping a few written entries in there of what was happening. So anyway, the next day, I came to Prabhupada's rooms about 11 in the morning, and Upendra was there with his suitcase packed up. He had his ticket to Fiji, and he was just getting some blessings from Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada put a garland on him and gave him a few brief instructions for preaching in Fiji, and then he was gone. And then Prabhupada looked at me and said, so, let's go. So that was it. Prabhupada went upstairs, put his gamsha on. I had the oils, mustard oil for his body, sandalwood oil for his head. Prabhupada sat down, closed his eyes, and then I began. So I was just desperately trying to remember, what order to massage the different parts of his body, how long it should take, 10 or 15 minutes for the head, 10 minutes for each arm, like that. And so, of course, I was very nervous, but at the same time, I was thinking, I'm never going to get a chance to do this again. So I tried my best. I just prayed to Krishna, let me give Prabhupada a good massage. I hadn't a clue what I was doing, but I just tried to imagine what it would feel like to be receiving the massage, and then apply that to, my giving it to Prabhupada. And after about 1 or 2 minutes, something completely unexpected happened. I had not been tipped off or anything. I guess it wasn't something that was experienced by people like Upendra, who were experienced masseurs of Prabhupada. But after 2 minutes doing Prabhupada's head, all the joints in my fingers began to stiffen and cramp and, kind of freeze. And it was really starting to hurt. And I was massaging Prabhupada's head. And I was thinking, oh no, this is the first minute of doing this service, and my hands are just completely freezing up. So I just started praying, please, please, Krishna, let me do this. Let me continue with this massage. And within about another minute, all of a sudden, all the joints relaxed. My hands became very flexible, and I never had that problem again. So again, Krishna's mercy. So I gave Prabhupada his massage, sandalwood oil for his head, and then the rest of his body with mustard oil. I did his head first, then sat around the back, did his back, then came around the side, did his right arm, right leg, his chest, and then around the other side, left arm, left leg, and then finished with his lotus feet. And that was the first time I really understood that meaning of, what lotus feet are, because Prabhupada's feet were incredibly soft, like the petals, just like the petals of a lotus flower. I was amazed, actually, surprised. So it was a wonderful experience that first day. And then at the end of it, Prabhupada went downstairs and had his bath. So apparently later on, he told Harikesh, he gave me a good massage. So I was very happy to hear that. And so I continued with that service for about 4 days. And Prabhupada had come to Delhi in order to meet up with a gentleman called Gulzarilal Nanda. Nandaji was famous from the partition days. He'd been a member of the first government, democratic government. He was, by this time, of course, in 75, he was retired from politics. And he had secured some funds to do renovation work in Kurukshetra. So earlier in the year, after the opening of the Krishna Balaram Mandir, Prabhupada had been invited for a one-day kind of sadhu gathering in Kurukshetra. Nandaji was there. Prabhupada spoke, apparently. This was the day after Ram Navami. And he invited Prabhupada to start an ISKCON center in Kurukshetra. So Prabhupada said, all right, but I'll not make any decision right now. I already have my traveling arranged for the rest of the summer. But in the end of the year, then I'll be back and we can go together and I'll see what's going on there and see what we can do. So that was the end of November then when Prabhupada came back to Delhi. Nandaji came after a couple of days and they fixed up December the 1st as being the day when they would meet in Kurukshetra and discuss how ISKCON could develop something there. So Prabhupada had actually had an idea to start like a Varnashram college. And there was one new devotee, his name was Alfred Ford, later Ambarish Prabhu. So he gave Prabhupada $150,000 to begin that Kurukshetra project. So when Prabhupada came up to Delhi, Ambarish had actually flown from America to Nairobi. He met up with Prabhupada there, came to Bombay with him, and then came up to Delhi for this meeting with Gulzarilal Nanda and visit to Kurukshetra. So Ambarish was also there, but he was staying in a hotel near the temple. So the arrangements were decided. Prabhupada would go on December the 1st. There was another devotee, his name was Chaitya Guru. He was from Punjab. So he, Ambarish and myself in one car, and Prabhupada, Gopal Krishna Maharaj, who was an Adhikari at that time, Hansadutta Prabhu had flown in from Europe to be Prabhupada's secretary for 1 month. So he was there, and we went in 2 cars on the 1st of December up to Kurukshetra. So that was a really nice visit. They were spending a lot of money there. At that time, I think Nanda had gotten some grants from the government, about 1.5 crores. Of course, nowadays, 1 crore of rupees is nothing. But in those days, there was only 7 rupees to the dollar. So it was a huge amount of money. And so when Prabhupada got there, they put us up in a motel, and then they took us on a tour of the Brahma Sarovar area. Those of you that have been there, of course, you'll know there's a very big lake there. So they were just renovating everything, putting in sandstone walkways and steps into the ghat. They had a big Ayurvedic clinic, which they were developing. They had a huge Goshala. They were growing crops, organic crops. So it was a big affair. And Prabhupada was shown various spots where he could get some land. So, of course, Prabhupada was thinking that they should give us the land and we'll develop this Varnashram college. Nandaji was thinking that ISKCON's got a lot of money, so we'll sell them the land. So that had to be worked out later on. Anyway, so we had a good walk around. By the midday, Prabhupada went back to the motel, and then I gave him his massage out on the grounds of the motel there. And Nandaji came. He was sitting on a chair next to Prabhupada, and they were discussing various aspects of Indian culture and, surcharging the people with their spiritual culture again, etc., etc. Because Nandaji was a follower of Gandhi, M.K. Gandhi. So they had some attachment to the Bhagavad Gita. And so they were talking on the basis of the Gita, because now we're in Kurukshetra, which is where it was spoken. So naturally they were talking about Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's, what the whole aim of the Bhagavad Gita is. So at one point, Prabhupada quoted the first verse from the 4th chapter about how knowledge comes down from Vivasvan, the sun god, to Manu and Ichvaku, etc. And when Prabhupada quoted that verse and cited the example of Vivasvan, the sun god, then Nanda was kind of surprised. He said, well, you mean that there is actually such a thing as a sun god? Prabhupada, he says, yes, of course, these are his words are there in the Bhagavad Gita. So typically, Nanda was an impersonalist. And like Gandhi, he never really actually believed that there was such a person as Krishna. They took the Bhagavad Gita as something symbolic or something that was meant to stimulate your mental faculties and come up with different ideas about what life is and what the aim of it is. So he was surprised when he saw that Prabhupada was taking the Bhagavad Gita literally. And so he sat back to listen. At the end of it, Prabhupada told him, he said, now you're an older man. I guess he must have been about 75 or 80 at that time, a little older than Prabhupada. So Prabhupada told him, why don't you take sannyas and preach Bhagavad Gita, and we'll do it together. And that really made Gozal Nanda fidget in his seat. I mean, he practically was, nearly falling off his seat because Prabhupada suggested that he take sannyas. So Prabhupada didn't push the point. He could see he was very uncomfortable with that concept. But anyway, it was a nice, friendly meeting. And then that was it. Prabhupada had his lunch. They took him to Kurukshetra University. He left some of his books there in the university. And then about maybe 3 o'clock, the visit was finished. So Nanda went his ways. And then before we left, we had some discussion. And Prabhupada, Harikesh also, he knew that there was another place nearby called Jyotisar, which was actually said to be the place where Krishna actually spoke the Gita, not Brahma Sarova. Brahma Sarova was where Krishna and Balaram and Subhadra had come for the eclipse, and all the residents of Vrindavan had met him there. So that was in that Brahma Sarova area. But Jyotisar was a smaller, much smaller place. And so we decided, now we're here, Prabhupada decided we should go and see Jyotisar as well and see what land is available. So we drove up the road. It was about 7 miles. We came to this smaller, much smaller place. There was like a big tank of water, several small temples, and there was a banyan tree with a half life-size murti of Krishna and Arjuna on the chariot, and Krishna's half turning and speaking the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. So we looked around for 10 or 20 minutes. At the end of it, Prabhupada said, "So, what do you think? How do you like this place?" So Harikesh, he kind of summed it up. He said, the other place, Brahma Sarova, was like Vaikuntha, but this place, this is like Vrindavan. So he was, really impressed with the atmosphere in Jyotisar. So Prabhupada, he said that the Brahma Sarova was like the heavenly planets, but he said this place, Jyotisar, is like Vaikuntha. So Prabhupada smiled, he said, yes. So he said, we'll try and get some land here, and you can negotiate for some land at Brahma Sarova also. He said, we'll have deities of Krishna, Balaram, and Subhadra at the Brahma Sarova because they came there for the pujas. And he said, here we'll have Krishna and Arjuna. This is where he spoke the Bhagavad Gita. So that was his idea, because it took a long, long time to fulfill that. Later on, we found out that there was a lot of opposition from the locals to having an ISKCON center in Kurukshetra, and we were blocked deliberately by some people from the university there. But anyway, that's another story. So that was it. We had a look around, and then we drove back to Delhi. So when we got back to Delhi, it was late at night, I think about 9 o'clock. We were a bit hungry, so Hansadutta, he had gone off with, I think, Ambarish to a local eatery, restaurant. And I came into Prabhupada's room ready to give him his evening massage. Prabhupada was still sitting back at his desk. He said, so get the mail. So I went and looked around. I found there was a small stack of letters for Srila Prabhupada. So I brought them in. And of course, the system was that the secretary would collect the mail every day. And then he would open up the letters, read them to Prabhupada. Prabhupada would make some comments in response to the letters. The secretary would write them down in rough, and then he'd go away and type them up. Later in the evening, the typed up replies were put onto Prabhupada's desk. He read them and signed them, and then they were sent out the next day. So Prabhupada was pretty strict about getting his mail done every day. He didn't like having a backlog because he was getting about a half a dozen letters every day. So he was very regulated and determined, and he told me, so Hansadutta was not around. Harikesh was in another room, so he told me, go and bring the letters. So when I got them, he said, so open them. So I was very surprised. I mean, I wasn't even Prabhupada's full-time servant, and he was having me open his mail, which was the secretary's job, and read them out to Prabhupada. So as I was reading one or two out, there was one from Pushta Krishna Swami. He was in South Africa. He was saying that he was going to come up to Europe, buy a Mercedes-Benz car for Srila Prabhupada and drive it overland to India to give to Prabhupada to use whilst he was there. And there were other letters. I just remember that one in particular. So Prabhupada, as he was listening to me read out one of the letters, he took another letter himself. He opened it up and he was reading and listening to me, reading out the other one. So as I was doing that, Harry Cage walked into Prabhupada's room. He saw me reading Prabhupada's letters and he flipped. He said, "What are you doing?" And he started really, getting on my case. "You can't touch Prabhupada's mail. Only the secretary does that." So I said, "Well, what can I do?" Prabhupada asked me to do it. Prabhupada himself, he just stood up and walked out, went to the bedroom. And so Hari Kesha admitted that I had no choice except to do what Prabhupada told me to do. So that was it. Then I went into Prabhupada's room and gave him his evening massage. So as he was laying there in the darkness, he said, "So, how did you like Jyotisar?" So I said, "Yeah." I said, "It's very nice. It's like the spiritual world." Prabhupada said, "Yes." He said, "Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita there." So that was my first day of travel. I wasn't even the full-time servant at that time. I was just doing the Maso. The next day we left Delhi and went to Vrindavan. And when we arrived, of course, the devotees were all there to greet him and receive him. And then they took darshan of the deities. Then Prabhupada had received his Guru Puja. And then after that, he gave his Bhagavatam class. So then at the end of the class, then he left the temple. He went into his quarters. And Hari Kesha had informed me the day before that when we get back to Vrindavan, I've arranged for another devotee. His name's Prithu Putra. He was a friend of mine. I've arranged for Prithu Putra to do the massages whilst Prabhupada's in Vrindavan. Prabhupada was going to stay there for about 10 days. And so he said that'll be it for you. And Gopal Krishna, he was telling me that now we have a problem with the management in Calcutta. I have nobody to take charge there. So I want you to immediately, when you leave Prabhupada's party, I want you to get on the next train to Calcutta to be the new temple president, which I thought was absurd. I'd only been in India about 3 months. I didn't know any other languages except English. I had no idea what I was doing. And he's going to make me the temple president. In those days, that was the situation. The devotees that were there were very few of us. Most of us were Westerners. I was like 24 years old, 25 years old. I had no idea what the culture was, how to deal with people or anything. And he was going to make me the temple president. So if you wanted to be a temple president or, head pujari or whatever, then India was the place. You could do, there's plenty of service there. Anyway, so we got to Vrindavan on the 2nd of December, and Hari Kesha told me, now, here's Prithu Putra. Prabhupada had gone into his rooms after the morning program. Hari Kesha had followed him, and then he told me, he said, now, explain to Prithu Putra how to do the massage. Prithu, you come at 11:30 and you can begin. So that was it. I had made a mistake when we were in Kurukshetra. Prabhupada had bathed and he had dropped his gamsha into a bucket. There's 2 brass buckets for bathing from. And he had dropped his gamsha into one of the buckets. When I went in to clean up, I actually didn't know that the gamsha was there. So when we got to Vrindavan the next day, I had to go and buy a new gamsha for Srila Prabhupada. So I took Prithu Putra with me. We went to Loy Bazaar. I bought the gamsha, and at the same time I was telling him about what had happened in Delhi and in Kurukshetra. He was very excited, of course, that he was going to massage Prabhupada. I wasn't feeling bad or anything. I just thought it's a miracle that I got to even massage Prabhupada one time. So I was very happy. I just, somehow or another been given this chance. So we got back to the temple just before the massage. And as we came in through the side gate opposite to Prabhupada's quarters, I saw Hari Kesha was there. So he was looking very glum. And he said, well, he said, I told Prabhupada that Prithu that you were going to do his massage, and Prabhupada got angry. And he said, no, why are you changing? He was doing all right. There's no need for change. Otherwise, constant changing, they'll get disturbed. So Harikesh told Prithu, he said, I'm sorry, but that's it. And then he turned to me, he said, Harry, sorry. He said, Prabhupada not only said you should stay on to do the massage, but you have to be given the full servant's duties. So I was in ecstasy, jumping up and down. And he said, get your suitcase and move in. So I, packed my bags up, came straight into Prabhupada's quarters. So that was how I got connected as Prabhupada's servant. There's one little addition to that. After a few days, I actually got very attached, naturally enough, to doing the service. And Prabhupada seemed to like what I was doing. The first day that we were there, though, in the afternoon, he gave me my first direct instruction, because he had a room on the roof. So he said, now I'm going to take rest for an hour. He said, you sit here outside the door. He said, now your only business is to be with me 24 hours. So that was it. That was my first instruction. So I was very happy, of course. Anyway, after a few days, Gopal Krishna was still pressuring me that, I still want you to go to Calcutta and be the temple president there. So I discussed it with Harikesh and Hansadutta. Harikesh actually had gotten on Gopal Krishna Maharaj's case. He told him, he said, you can't tell him what to do now. He's part of Prabhupada's party. And Prabhupada's party is transcendental to any temple management. So he was kind of, warning him off. Anyway, after about 3 or 4 days, I got really attached to doing the service. So I wanted to stay on as Prabhupada's servant. Otherwise, when he left Vrindavan, which was scheduled, I think, for about the 12th of December, he was going to go back down to, first to Delhi and then down to Bombay. And Nitai Das was there. He had been Prabhupada's servant before, and he was supposed to rejoin the party, and that would be the end of my tenure. So I was, getting attached to this service. So I discussed it with Harikesh, and he said, go and ask Prabhupada if you can stay on. He said, and I said, well, I don't want to bother him with, my desires. He said, no, now you're Prabhupada's servant, so whatever you do is going to affect him. So I went to give Prabhupada his noon massage, and as I was massaging, I asked him, I said, Srila Prabhupada, I really like doing this service. I've been told by Gopal Krishna I have to go to Calcutta, but actually I'd rather stay here and serve you. So Prabhupada, his first question was, he said, what is your education? So I said, well, I went to a British grammar school. He said, and how many languages do you know? I said, I only know one, that's English. I'm not very good at learning languages. So Prabhupada, So he said, go and call Harikesh. So Harikesh came up, Prabhupada asked him, he said, so he wants to stay with me as my servant. What do you think? So Harikesh by this time had become quite pleased with the way I was fitting in and doing my service nicely. We were getting on very well. So he said, I think that it's a good idea. Harry Sauri doesn't have any other service, so he can become your personal servant permanently. Otherwise, Nitai Das, he'll just come on for 2 or 3 months and then he'll leave again as he did last time, because he was more interested in developing something to do with the school and the Gurukul, etc. So that was it. Prabhupada said, all right, very good. So then, I got appointed as Prabhupada's permanent servant there. So that seemed to settle things up. At the end of Prabhupada's visit, I think on the 12th, Prabhupada went back to Bombay. He went back to Delhi. And at that time, he was trying to get his books translated into Hindi. He was very keen on that. And he had Gopal Krishna put an advert in the newspapers for Hindi to English or English to Hindi translation. So people were coming in the evening and Prabhupada was interviewing them. And he would give them a sample and ask them, go and translate this and then come back tomorrow. I'll look through it and we'll talk, we'll talk about it then. So the last night that we were there for a couple of days. In the evening of the second day, then about 9 o'clock, we hear a knock on the door. This man came in and it turned out he had seen the advert and he had a PhD in Chaitanya Vaishnavism. So when Prabhupada heard that, he said, oh, very good. He wanted to get into more detail with him about it, but it was late at night and he was tired, so there was no possibility of doing that in the evening. So he said, tomorrow morning, first thing, we're going down to Bombay. So can you come down with us? So the man said, yeah, I can, but I don't have a ticket. I don't have any money. So Prabhupada called in Harikesh. And Prabhupada asked him, he said, so I want this man to come with us. Now, what tickets do we have? So Harikesh said, well, there's yours, there's mine, there's Hansaduta's, and there's Hari Sauri's. So Prabhupada, I was sitting there at the side, and without even looking at me, Prabhupada said, so give him his. So my ticket was handed over to this gentleman. And because things weren't computerized in those days, you could change the name on the tickets by hand. So this man was given my ticket, and Harikesh just looked at me, kind of shrugged, well, too bad. So that was it. The next morning, we went out to the airport with Prabhupada, and he and Hansadutta and Harikesh got on the plane. The man was there. So they all got on the airplane. And so I happened to have some money, a little bit of money, which I brought from Australia. So as soon as they flew out, I went and bought a ticket for the next flight out, which was later in the morning. And it never occurred to me, that I wasn't on the party anymore. I just thought, well, okay, you needed the ticket. Now I'll buy another one and I'll continue on. So I flew down to Bombay. I got there about midday or so. And at that time, Palam Airport was really small. It took about 15 minutes by rickshaw to get to the Hare Krishna land. That was my first visit to Bombay. So first time I was seeing Hare Krishna land. And Prabhupada's quarters were at the back. So I found out where he was staying. And then I went up on, it was a 3-story building. I went up to his flat. And when I opened the door, just at that very moment, Prabhupada had just finished receiving his massage. And he had come from the other side of his flat to go to the bathroom just as I walked in. So he said, oh, you're here. All right, very good. And he went off and took his bath. And then Nitai came, and Nitai had given him the massage. He said, oh, Hari Sauri, you're here. Oh, well, that's good. I wanted to serve in Vrindavan anyway. So I'm starting to realize that actually they thought that when my ticket was handed over, that was the end of my tenure as a servant. I was the only one that I was so thick in the head. I didn't realize that I'd lost my service when this ticket was given over. I just assumed, that was it. I was on the party. So then Harikesh came through and he said, Hari, sorry, you're here. All right, very good. So then I realized that all thought that, my short tenure was over. But Prabhupada was, very liberal like that. He was very happy. All right, come on, no problem. So that was it. That was, I guess, Krishna's final test. Fortunately, because, Krishna's knowledge and forgetfulness, he bewildered me to make sure that I went down there to massage Prabhupada. So after that, I ended up traveling with Prabhupada for about a year and a half. I left the party at the end of the Gaur Purnima festival in 1977. This was on March 13. Prabhupada had gotten very sick at the Gaur Purnima festival, and the devotees, when they'd finished attending Mayapur festival leg, they all went to Vrindavan, but Prabhupada stayed in Mayapur. He was very seriously ill, and he never really recovered from that illness. But by that time, I'd had nearly a year and a half traveling with Prabhupada. I was fortunate enough that I was on his last world tour. We had gone in mid-April. We had flown down to Melbourne in Australia, then New Zealand, then Fiji, Hawaii for 1 month, then Los Angeles, Detroit, Toronto, New Vrindavan, Washington, D.C., New York Rath Yatra, the first Rath Yatra there, then to London, Paris, and New Mayapur, Tehran, and then back to Bombay by mid-August. So I had about a year in India with Prabhupada, and the rest of the time was on that tour because there's lots of things there. But one thing that I did do was I kept the diary that I'd started, which you can see here. So I kept this diary fairly, what they say, religiously. Every day I would write something down. And I did that for the whole nearly a year and a half. So a few years ago, I decided to publish my diary. I gathered up the materials. I had my handwritten diary. Then, of course, there was the morning walks, lectures, meetings with visitors that were all recorded. So I gathered up all the transcripts and recorded files. There was Prabhupada's correspondence. So I got not just the letters that Prabhupada wrote, but the letters that were written to Prabhupada so that you could see the context of Prabhupada's answers or statements. And then, of course, there were a lot of photographs. So with those materials, I started working on this Transcendental Diary series. And I got 4 volumes out by 1996, Prabhupada's centennial year. I got 1 more volume out in 2005. I've got enough material left yet for another 2 volumes. I have to admit, I've been a bit remiss about writing them. I got distracted into other projects. And writing is not, it's not an easy task if you want to do it properly. So I've got 5 volumes out and 2 more to do. Just recently, this last year, I retired from management due to health reasons. I was running or developing this Bhaktivedanta Research Center in Calcutta. I did that for 9 years. And then the last couple of years, I've been working on a second diary that I kept, which was for the month of October 1977, which, as you all know, is the month Prabhupada spent in Vrindavan, and he left us in mid-November. So the last 6 weeks, October and half of November, I had booked in actually as Prabhupada's visiting secretary. When I left the party in March of 77, Prabhupada sent me back to Australia. He made me the GBC there after 1 month. Then, of course, he had his emergency meetings in May when he was in Rishikesh, suddenly it was nice, but then suddenly Prabhupada announced that he was going to leave his body, so they took him straight back to Vrindavan. That kind of receded a little bit for a few months, but in May of 77, Prabhupada called for all the GBCs. He finalized what he wanted for the management. He made a will. He stated what he wanted for giving new initiations, like that, and also what he wanted for the future of the BBT. So whilst I was there with the other GBCs, I booked in to be Prabhupada's visiting GBC secretary for the month of October. And so I arrived in Bombay on September 29. Prabhupada had been to London for a week or 2 weeks for his Vyasa Puja. Then he had flown back to Bombay. And so I met up with the party there in Bombay. When I arrived, I went straight in to see Prabhupada. It was about 3:30 in the morning. And I was actually very shocked to see how his bodily physical condition had depleted in the last, preceding months. And practically he had not eaten anything solid for about 3 months. He was just having some fruit juice and some stuff called Complan. It's like a protein drink. And that was it. He was so weak that he couldn't even turn over in the bed anymore by himself. And of course, there was no question of preaching, going on tour or anything like that. But somehow or another, he'd gone to London. But then he got sick there. He had an operation, and then they brought him back. So when I arrived at the end of September to take up my tenure for 1 month as a secretary, Prabhupada was there in Bombay. So the same evening that I arrived, Prabhupada called all the senior men into his room, and there was about 8 or 9 of us: Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Gopal Krishna, Giriraj, Brahmananda, Abhiram, myself, Kuladri from New Vrindavan, Upendra, his servant. So we were all called in, and we had to take a vote on whether Prabhupada should stay in Bombay, because they were getting near to the point where they had to start getting ready for the opening of the Juhu Beach temple project. But it was going to be at least another few weeks or a couple of months. And in the meantime, Prabhupada, was not active. So there was a lot of clutter and banging coming from the construction. So the question was, should Prabhupada remain in Bombay up for the opening, or should he go back to Vrindavan? So when it was my turn to give my opinion, I was a little unsure about the criteria. So I asked, is it for health or is it for preaching? So Prabhupada said it is for health. So then I, along with everybody else except Gopal Krishna Maharaj, voted that he should go back to Vrindavan. To stay in Bombay for the preaching was going to be a long drawn out affair. And so we felt it would be best if Prabhupada was back in Vrindavan. And because Gopal Krishna, he had a good reason for not wanting Prabhupada to go there yet, because he knew that as soon as Prabhupada leaves Bombay, then all the devotees, are going to stop what they're doing. They're going to go with him, because everybody knew going back to Vrindavan means the possibility of leaving, his body. So anyway, it was decided. So the same evening, I took the last flight from Bombay up to Delhi. I stayed overnight in the temple there. I discussed with Tamal Krishna Maharaj what we would need for Prabhupada to be able to stay in his quarters in Vrindavan. The bedroom itself, existing bedroom and bed, was too small. So we decided to get a double bed and put that in the darshan room, in the front, and that would give us enough space to be able to come and go and look after Prabhupada properly. So as I had done when I was servant, I was much more conscious about keeping a record of what was happening in October of 77. So I kept another handwritten diary. I have that with me. After I wrote it, I put it away. I didn't look at it for about 30 years. Anyway, so I kept another I kept another diary. Tamal Krishna Maharaj also kept a diary. And this last 2 years, I've been working on that last diary, second diary. It's just been completed. I've just had the layout done. So that will be published and available within about maybe 1 month. I don't think I'll get it out in time for Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja, but it's done. So that one's a much smaller volume. It only covers 1 month, but it kind of details, that last 1 month of Prabhupada's stay on this planet. It's called Back to Vrindavan, which I thought was an appropriate title as subject. So that brings us up today. As I say, I'll be publishing that other diary, Back to Vrindavan, very shortly. Once that's done, if I'm able, I guess when you're old, it's part of the course. Things get much more difficult to do. If I'm able, then I'll go back and I'll complete the last 2 volumes of the Transcendental Diary series. And then I guess that'll be it. So we've gone over time. I'm going to stop at this point. I hope that gives a little glimpse. I mean, these diary volumes, this one covers 4 months. It's for volume 1. It's just been reprinted. So that's 600 pages. So all the diaries are about 500 or 600 pages. There's a lot of work. I'm not sure whether I'll be able to complete it or not, but we'll see what Krishna wants. So that's it. If you have any questions or comments, I'll be happy to try and answer if there's enough time. If there's not, then we'll have to rebook and have another session sometime in the future.
That would be wonderful. We can do that.
Well, actually, when I came tonight, I'd spent the day looking through my diary from January, February of 1977, which is when Prabhupada went to the Kumbh Mela, and then from there to Calcutta, and then down here to, not here, I'm in Mayapur, but you're there, down to Bhubaneswar and Jagannath Puri. So I actually have my diary out on my computer at the moment. I was thinking I would speak from that, but there's not enough time now. So maybe another future date we can do that. So thank you very much for taking the opportunity of recollecting some of Prabhupada's transcendental pastimes.
Thank you so much for sharing all that with us, Prabhuji. It's very, very touching to hear about Prabhupada, and it's so important for all of us. We didn't get a chance to meet Srila Prabhupada, and to hear from you, that's as close as we've got. So it means so much to us. Thank you.
Is it time for any questions, or?
Amritesh,
Yeah. Hare Krishna, Mr. Harishwar Prabhu. Thank you so much for your sweet words. I just want to put up 2-3 quick reflections and then we'll go for some questions we have got. Like you said, Prabhupada's party is transcendental to any temple management, and you are the member of that Srila Prabhupada's party. And you also mentioned that how you serve Srila Prabhupada and you are serving him as his permanent servant. That is so true and relief giving that you are his permanent servant really. And
Well, we're all Prabhupada's servants. I mean,
obviously, but now in front of us, you are now present. And the way you present Srila Prabhupada's pastimes is so sweet and memorable. We also feel that we are associated with Srila Prabhupada due to you. And Prabhuji, there is one big question for me, that you maintain diaries, you told, but to maintain diaries, sometimes we have to become late night because we have to write down what we went through the day. And if we write down, in my case, I write around once or twice a week maximum. I'm not able to do more. Would you like to give some suggestions? How should I make the diary?
well, I can't speak for you.
Okay, for you, okay, how you maintain, I may want to hear.
For me, generally speaking, I would write something down at the end of the day, or if not then early the next morning. Sometimes it was a little difficult to find the time to do it, but initially I started keeping my diary because it was a very selfish consideration. I just wanted to be able to remember in the future what had transpired. But once I got added to the party on a more permanent basis, I started to realize, actually, this is not for me, this is for all the devotees. Yeah, so that they can understand what it was like to be with Prabhupada, and get some of that kind of experience of what Prabhupada was doing, where he was going, who he was speaking to, what was going on in his rooms, that only a few people had privilege to see. So I wanted to do that. So I just made the time. Sometimes in mid-morning, when Prabhupada took his breakfast, afterwards he would have a 1 hour rest. So sometimes during that 1 hour, I would write a few notes down, or in the afternoon. But it just requires a bit of determination to do it. And pretty well every day I had a few notes written down. And of course I was recording things with the cassette player, so I had those recordings I can refer back to. But when I left the party in mid-March of 77, Tamal Krishna Maharaj had just been made Prabhupada's permanent secretary. So when I was leaving, I went to see him and I told him, I said, Maharaj, during my travels with Prabhupada, I've been keeping a diary. So I said, you should now, keep a diary, because he didn't think it was necessary. And as Prabhupada was sick as the new secretary, he was very, very busy. He said, I won't have the time. So I said, look, so many servants have come and gone, but practically speaking, hardly any of them have published anything out or kept a diary. I think Satsvarup Maharaj was possibly the only one that was, punctilious about that. He used to write everything down. I told Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I said, Maharaj, you've got to do this. Otherwise, there's so many things that happen, in Prabhupada's exchanges with others that nobody knows about. They've just been lost because nobody bothered to write it down. I said, you've got to do this. It's very important for the future. So he said, well, I'll think about it. So that was it. I didn't want to push him too much. I left. You will see TKG's diary that came out many years later. And that begins around about April, 10, 12. So it means from the 13th of March when I left, there's a gap of about 3 or 4 weeks. And then I think Tamal Krishna Maharaj realized that what I told him was true, that if you don't write it down, it's going to be lost. So he started keeping his diary, and that runs through till Prabhupada's disappearance. So pretty well between the two of us, we have the last 2 years of Prabhupada's stay with us, well detailed. So I think it's a useful service, be a diarist. That's how we know, the activities of all the great saints that have gone before us. Somebody wrote things down. Prabhupada mentions actually in the Chaitanya Charitamrita in one purport that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said that there were actually many, many biographies written of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but now we only have a few left, Chaitanya Bhagavat, Chaitanya Charitamrita, etc. He said, and this is a great loss for the world. So we have to be very aware that if we don't write things down, after a year or two, they just fade from your memory. They don't come back. So if you either write them down or you lose it. So I don't know. I mean, if you're writing for yourself, still you want to do that so that you can, refer back to it later in your life. Maybe you'll do some writing based on that. But it's a good thing to write. Prabhupada liked it. He encouraged us. He told us, I want every one of you, as I am writing, you should also write. And whatever it is, whatever you realize, just write it down. So that's our family. Yeah, we're publishers. Prabhupada said that. That's our real work, is publishing books, writing and publishing books. So as Prabhupada, made the time, his writing was incredible. He began when he was 64 in 1960, in Vrindavan. He just moved into Radha Damodar temple. And that was when he started work on an 18,000 verse, book, Bhagavatam. And he got the first one out after several years. And one of his friends or some acquaintance that he had said, why are you doing this? You're already old. And the Bhagavatam's like 12 cantos. You've just got the first volume of part of the first canto. So, he couldn't see the point to it. But Prabhupada said in the preface in the second volume of the first canto, Prabhupada refers to this and he said, so my reply to him was that, look, in the heavenly planets, the demigods have got millions of volumes of the Bhagavatam. So he said, if I write, a few verses on this planet or a few, cantos on this planet, then what is that? By comparison, it's nothing. So that was Prabhupada's mood, that this was his assigned service for the rest of his earthly stay, was to get this Bhagavatam out. And even though it seemed an impossible task, if you add it up, it took him 4 years to do the first canto. If you do 4 years for each of the remaining 11 cantos, that's 44 years. Prabhupada would have been if he went at the same rate, Prabhupada would have been about 115 years old by the time he finished the Bhagavatam. But Prabhupada didn't think in earthly terms. Yeah, he just did it because from within, Krishna was telling him, this is important. And Prabhupada said many times, he said, this is not my words. I read the Bhagavatam myself, because these words are not my words, they're Krishna's words. I personally had Prabhupada tell me that when we were in Vrindavan in September of 76. We were discussing this verse about the qualities of a sadhu. And Prabhupada had Hari Kesh read it out. This was in his room at breakfast, after breakfast. And so he read out the qualities of a sadhu. And he said, well, I don't think that there's anybody that's following this Srila Prabhupada except you. So Prabhupada said, no, he said, I say that this is so sweet. He said, because, this is the Bhagavatam. He said, I say it is my writing, but he said, I know it is not my writing. It is Krishna's writing. So Prabhupada, when he took up this seemingly inconceivably difficult task, an impossible task, he actually told George Harrison in July of 76 at the Manor, when George complimented him, he said that, I can't say how he could possibly write so much. He said, it's difficult enough as it is just to read it. And Prabhupada said, yes. He said, for a human being, it is not possible. So, when Prabhupada got to America, I was just watching Gagamuni, Brahmananda, on one of those memories tapes, and he was recounting, how Prabhupada had gotten this dictaphone. So when Prabhupada came to America, and then that was when he began his external preaching, on a big scale, then Krishna supplied to him the implements that he would need to continue doing the Bhagavatam, the dictaphone. And not only the dictaphone, but then people like Brahmananda and others who joined up with him and transcribed them. So very quickly, Prabhupada, the pace of his translation immeasurably increased. Krishna gave him the means to do it. So that's got to be our mood. And it's not that it was easy. Krishna supplied things, but Prabhupada had to give up certain things, like sleeping, in order to be able to get that Bhagavatam out. Although the implements were there, the help was there, but still it required from Prabhupada, he had to give up sleeping in order to do it. So writing is a very unique kind of services. It's not easy, it's difficult. But if you're prepared to make the sacrifices, then, the whole movement actually depends on Prabhupada's books. If he had not made that sacrifice, of getting up at 12 o'clock at night and working till 4 or 5 in the morning, every day, wherever he went, every evening. If he had not done that, then where would we be? We'd all be Prakriti Sahajas by now. Yeah, Prabhupada's books are the law books for us for the next, as they say, 10,000 years. So it's important for us to write. There's no doubt about that. And Prabhupada showed the example. So if you're writing, all right, right now it may be just something for yourself, like a daily diary, but from that, other things will come if you're determined.
Thank you so much for your guidance.
Madhavananda, he knows. He's a writer and he's collecting writings. All right, one more question, then we'll finish.
Okay, so just 2 questions, request, sorry. One question is from Tukaram Prabhu. He will conclude. And one question here, my one devotee wrote, is my friend. He writes that my question is, what qualities, attitude, or behavior of a devotee pleased Srila Prabhupada the most? And how can one receive those qualities?
What instructions of Prabhupada will please him the most if we do it?
No, he's saying that what qualities or attitude or behavior of the devotee pleases most Srila Prabhupada?
Oh, well, humility. You can't do anything if you're not humble. Yeah, a person who's not humble is always seeing others as competitors. Yeah, if we want, the most important thing in the Krishna consciousness movement is to realize what Sankirtan means. It's not Kirtan, but Samkirtan. Samkirtan means with others. So unless there's a mood of cooperation, then nothing will be achieved. Unless we're prepared to put aside, our material conceptions and egos and our connection with the three modes of material nature, then it'll be very, very difficult to preach. A preacher has to be very humble. You'll see in the 5th canto, it's mentioned there that a preacher can never become angry because who will then hear from you? So we have to somehow or another put aside our differences and work together combinedly. That's Sankirtan. That is the highest principle of spiritual life, is, cooperation together. What's going on in Vrindavan? The devotees are all cooperating together with Srimati Radharani at the head. How to please Krishna. There's no thought about themselves. How to please Krishna, that's the main thing. So we have to develop that mood. I realized actually when I first massaged Prabhupada, those first 3 or 4 days, I made mistakes and I got chastised for them, but not too heavily. But what I realized was that we're so tiny and small, we're bound to make mistakes. And so I've got a choice. I can either keep on doing the service, make mistakes and get chastised, and accept that chastisement humbly, and then go on with my service. Or, I can back off, see Prabhupada from a distance, not commit any offenses, but not have that opportunity to be close to him either. So I realized, I'm going to make mistakes sometimes. Prabhupada's going to, not be happy about that, obviously. But if I'm humble, that's like your protection against offenses. Just accept, all right, I did this wrong. Now let me correct it. And that's what Prabhupada looked for. If you made a mistake, he may become angry with you. But if you were humble, then all right, and overlook it. But if you keep on repeating the same mistakes again and again, then you'll get chastised. So you have to, the whole basis of this movement and our interactions with each other is humility. And that humility can be sustained by reading Prabhupada's books.
Thank you, Silpa. Thank you. That is on part of a disciple, but sometimes when you are guiding devotees, some devotees are depending on your guidance. Now, the devotee needs to be humble, but what should be our role? How we should be when we are guiding someone? That time?
Well, if you think that you're the guide, then,
we are put into somehow, some devotees are depending.
No, you're there to serve the devotees. When you get a position of authority, that authority doesn't mean that you're a big man now. It means you've got a big service. So how humble do you have to be able to do that service of helping others? If you don't have that humility, you won't be able to help others. A person who's proud, he'll use others to serve him. A person who sees himself as a servant of others, he'll make advancement. He gets help from Krishna. Yeah, that's the mood that we have to do. But we should never think that, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Krishna is the doer. We're assisting. That's all. I actually asked Prabhupada one time in Bombay, I said that you're always telling us, we should go out and preach. But at the same time, we're also told that a neophyte should not. Yeah, a third-class devotee, he should not go out and preach. Otherwise, he'll create a disturbance because he has no realization. So I couldn't quite put the two together because I said, I know I'm a third-class man. I said, so Prabhupada looked at me, he said, he said, I am preaching, you are assisting me. So that's the way we have to understand it. We get help from our superiors, we get their blessings, but then we've got to transfer that into giving shelter, giving advice, nurturing the Bhakti Lata, the Creeper of Devotional Service. You can only do that if you're humble. And you realize, you know, just because I've got the nomenclature, you know, head pujari or temple president or GBC or guru, or what, then that title doesn't mean that, you know, now you are the big man. It's a big responsibility. And to sustain that responsibility, that means you've got to really be surrendered. So it's, you know, in the material world, people want to climb up the ladder. You know, they step on the head of the people down and they pull down the ones that are up ahead. They're always competing, yeah, to get some title or another. Just like Prabhupada gave the example of Napoleon. He was in Paris on a morning walk. There's a statue of Napoleon and a written plaque at the base of it. And Prabhupada asked the devotees, what does it say? So they read it out. Napoleon is France. France is Napoleon. So, you know, Napoleon, he was responsible for the deaths of about 2 million soldiers. He fought 64 wars in about 10 or 12 years. Yeah. So he was so puffed up. That was his idea. He said, France is Napoleon, Napoleon is France. So then Prabhupada, when he heard that, he said, so here is France. Where is Napoleon? So for 10 or 20 years, we become a big man, terrorize the whole of Europe. But inevitably, time catches up, whisks him away, and now he'll have to suffer for all his offenses to all those other living beings. Who knows where he is now? So in a similar kind of a way, we have to, you know, make sure that we don't become puffed up just because we've got some, you know, special ability or whatever it may be. I mean, there's so many things that can make you proud. But if we realize that actually everything is Krishna's, everything is meant for the service of Krishna. I am Krishna's. I am meant for the service of Krishna. Then you can sustain that nice attitude, and automatically people will become attracted. You'll be able to preach to them and help them. Yeah, but we're not here to manipulate and get others to improve our position. We're here to use whatever gifts we've got to improve their condition.
Thank you, Prabhu.
All right.
May your instructions enter my heart and remain forever.
Hare Krishna.
Can we just take a last question by my friend?
Yeah, all right. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Am I audible?
Yes. Yeah.
Prabhuji, like we've heard, I have read your Transcendental Diary, at least one volume I have read. So many times we see that Srila Prabhupada was very particular about his schedule. And you also told that like every day he was very particular about reading his mails. So that means one impression of Srila Prabhupada is that his time management was fantastic. And as young devotees, we all are struggling to manage our time. We are not able to give, we are not able to set our priorities. So what was Srila Prabhupada's formula? What was his secret of managing time so that he could do so much?
If your mind is under control and if your senses are under control, then it's not difficult to regulate yourself. As you said, as you mentioned, Prabhupada was incredibly regulated. He had the same schedule every day, day in, day out, wherever he went. When we were traveling internationally, especially, you know, we would fly from one country to another. There would be a difference in the, you know, the time zones, maybe 3 or 4 hours or even more. And, you know, for a couple of days afterwards, we'd have jet lag. But with Srila Prabhupada, he was, I mean, he never seemed to get tired, well, not tired, but he never seemed to be affected by jet lag. He would just, you know, get on the plane in one country, fly to another, whatever the time was in the place he was going to, he would drop straight into that schedule. And the reason he could do that was because, you know, his senses and his mind were, you know, controlled nicely. So when you're in that you use the term of managing time. So I don't know whether that's an accurate thing that you say you're managing time. We get managed by time, generally speaking. But when you're in Krishna's service, of course, Krishna is time. So Krishna facilitates you to, you know, to do things. So it's a question of knowing, seeing, you know, what your capabilities are, whatever Krishna has given you, and then seeing what duties need to be performed. And then you organize it. If you have difficulties in time management, as it says, the best thing is that you take a step back, look at what services you're doing. Don't overburden yourself. That's one thing in management. Otherwise, it's very easy for devotees to get into some management position. They get overloaded, and then after some time, they fry. Yeah. So Prabhupada gave us a morning sadhana. If you stick with your sadhana, then automatically the mind and senses gradually become properly controlled. Then you have enough enthusiasm that you can go out and do your services nicely. So it's a question of, you know, it's not just a question of doing things, but you've got to look after your own self first, spiritually. Therefore, Prabhupada said, get up, go to Mangalarti, chant 16 rounds every day, go to Bhagavatam class, see the deities. Then you're energetic, you're, you know, you're ready to go out and do your service. So it takes practice. I don't know whether that's clear or not, but yeah, you got to look after yourself first and then let the other things drop in. Whatever needs to be done. There's always more needs to be done than what we can do. That's, you know, Krishna's plan to help us surrender more and more and more and more. But if we have the right mood and attitude, we follow the prescription which is given by the acharyas, by the guru, then it's not too difficult. Otherwise, if you let your sadhana go, then everything else goes. So that's the first thing for any person who's involved in management. Make sure that you're spiritually engaged properly. Do all your rounds, do, you know, whatever services are needed. Okay, Hare Krishna. All right, I'm definitely going to have to take my leave now anyway.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for your time, and you spoke very nicely, Srila Prabhupada's Leela, and your transcendental diary. So when the Amritas Prabhu told me that we are inviting today Harisori Prabhu, I just could connect. Like I just remember that you wrote a diary, a long time back. So from that I know the Prabhu is coming, so he will speak about Srila Prabhupada. So I then told him that okay, I'm coming to the meeting. So thank you so much, Prabhuji. Again, also maybe another time also you can come because one meeting is not sufficient. So we need more of your association. So please,
Yeah.
we can arrange
Well,
more meetings.
At least one good thing that's come out from this virus,
Yeah.
with all the places being on lockdown and you're not able to travel here and there for preaching anymore, as we
Yes.
used to, at least for the duration of the disease. But it's made everybody connect more on the internet.
Yes.
And now we have these video conferencing and things like that, which we never bothered with much before.
Yes.
But by Krishna's mercy, now we can have these kinds of meetings. Next week or a couple of weeks, I've got one with devotees in Peru.
Yeah.
I've never been to South America,
Yes.
but we're giving class there by the grace of the technological. So it's good. I like these kinds of formats. You can get hundreds of people.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
At the same time, from around the world, they can.
Yeah, from anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So it's very good. Very useful for preaching.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
For attending the class. I hope that you've got some further realizations about Srila Prabhupada, and
Yes.
let's see what we can do for the future. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Yes, Harisori Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna, Amritas Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. We can leave now, I think.
No,
You want to share anything else?
15 मिनट में तुम्हें कोई दिला